Okay, here we are, Project 2025, a Montgomery Deep History study. I am very, very, very much excited about this. This is only the introduction. We're going to cover some preliminaries. So we're going to be dealing with a few things here. And this is why I call it the preliminaries, because I want us to establish some things first before we dive right in. There are a number of different things that we need to consider. Now, if I was to try to, just turn every single stone, we would be here for years, perhaps. This would be like it would go on for like a long time. So there's no need for me to go there. But the way we have it set out, we are going to cover we plan to cover every chapter so that it can be more so a comprehensive type of deal, and we want people to be just informed, fully informed. We want to make readers. We want to make people, or just to build people in this Montgomery Deep History University, so to speak. We want to create learners, people who understand how to sift through things, how to focus on syntax, sentence structure, how to deal with words. We want to engage our material in a way to where it's comprehensive, in a way to where there is more so a scholarly approach. And on top of that, we don't want to just go in and just absolutely dismantle and destroy things. When I think back to my some of my mentors and look at my educational past, I always remember the scholars who taught me. They taught me to present things like you present things and present it so well. Be fair to your opponent, like especially when you're dealing with polemics, when you're arguing, when you're presenting your case, when you're debating. Make sure that you are presenting in a way to where it almost seems as if you believe that very thing. You need to be able to do that for both sides, for the side that you take and for the side that would be on that would be the side that if you're in a debate, that your opponent takes. Okay, so we want to be fair. We do not, and scholarship is not about just going in and obliterating from the beginning. That's not what scholarship is about. Scholarship is presenting things. So you're weeding out emotions. You're working through a lot of just you're putting the emotions aside, and you're getting down to what needs to be had, which is the scholarship. You need to be able to present things to people in a reasonable manner. So I hope to, as we go through this, hopefully we're gonna have TikTok. It's gonna be fired up. We're gonna be doing lives on different segments. There'll be a certain time throughout the week where we'll take a certain portion of the study and then we'll go live about that study. So be prepared for that. Be on the lookout for that. We have our social media handles. They'll be coming up next, but we want this thing to really engage people. It's going to be posted on YouTube. I'm glad I can get all this stuff out now, because once we get into the chapter, we're just gonna hit the ground running. I won't give this lengthy, extensive intro. We're just gonna get in and we're gonna be running with the study. So who am I? I'm the CEO of Montgomery Deep History. Montgomery Deep History LLC is a walking tour and historical research organization of Montgomery, Alabama, and we do tours all over all over the state. We do tours in Birmingham. We do tours in Mobile, Montgomery, and also Selma. And so our aim is to present history in a way that will really help people to see what they need to do. So we don't want to just take people through an experience and then say, oh, well, But based on the current time, we we use the tour. The tour is kind of like a launch pad as to how to respond to the current time that we're in. Okay, so what to do? What do I do now based on the information that I've taken in? What do I do now? Okay, so that's how our tours are situated. We help those who are who really enjoy history, who have a knack for history, but we also want those who have those inquisitive minds and they're looking forward to impacting their immediate community. That will be the local community. They're looking forward to go back. They want to, like, there are a lot of people who are eager to go back and do some things to change their local community. That's key. Okay, going back to the local community, and after that, once we impact our local community, we can end up impacting cities, counties. Then next thing you know, after that, we get up to the state level, regional, and then we want to make a better tomorrow for our nation, because in spite of how we cut it, we are an American people, and we have to deal with that very thing. Okay. I also would like to say that of course, I'm a researcher. I'm a historian, a historic preservationist, and also a licensed pilot, federal Part 107 pilot. Okay, so many people just call that plain and simply a drone pilot. So I use my drone, I deploy it to capture history from above. I'm a former classical educator of a number of years, and I currently serve on a board of a discipleship home that helps men with various addiction. So the addiction can range from pornographic addiction all the way to drug addiction, and just a number of addiction. So my social media handles you see here, we have Facebook. Hit us up on Facebook, IG, YouTube, X, formerly known as Twitter, and also TikTok. TikTok is where we'll be, we'll be doing our lives there more so on TikTok. And so if you would, just make sure you check these out. Subscribe to YouTube. If you want to subscribe to our free quarterly newsletter, as MontgomeryDeepHistory.com, and you'll see it right on our homepage, to where you could stay up to date with some of the local things that are going on in Montgomery, because we won't end up posting that on social media. That would be special for those who subscribe, and then over time we'll be able to send perhaps some merch once we, as you see here, get our merch line going. But those are our social media handles. Let me also try to move on to this disclaimer here. Due to some of the content that we're going to be covering, I want to read this. Montgomery Deep History LLC does not offer financial advice, neither is it a financial advisory company. It utilizes forward-looking statements. These can be terms such as may, possibly, would, should, believes, etc. These words involve risks that could produce results that are starkly different from those expected by forward-looking statements. Okay? So yes, we will be covering different things that may end up touching on stock and things of that nature. So here we are with the introduction. This is the intro. No looking back. Let's go ahead and dive into what this is, just kind of what this is all about, how it came about, and things of that nature. So take a deep breath and breathe. All right. We want to have a balanced perspective. We want to have good dialogue. This is it's gonna spawn so much dialogue over the coming weeks. Some of you right now who are looking at this, you're going to be brought into some of the dialogue. You may not think that now, but you're going to be brought in on some of the live dialogue. And so would love to hear some of your thoughts because we have a lot to cover. So, what is the mandate for leadership, the conservative promise? Now, this is the actual book. This is the name. This is the title of the actual book. The Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. Now, it's basically part 2, just like the slide says. This is part 2 of the Mandate for Leadership of 1981. Did you know that there was a part 1? This right here is the sequel. So this occurred long ago. This is part 2 of the Mandate for Leadership of 1981. Do you remember which president was basically coming out of office, and then another one was transitioning into the Oval Office? This is defined as American conservatives' best efforts to change the federal government by initially influencing the executive branch. These particular conservatives who are active on this project are very well credentialed and have extensive experience. I see that typo. Have extensive experience in the political and communications domains. So when you look at this document, it's roughly 900 pages. This is not just a fly-by-night type of deal. This has been 40-something years in the making. So this is just a follow-up. This is a follow-up. Okay? Now, some may not have known that. Some may have thought that. Now, for those of you who were born in 1981, you just do the math. Do the math. How old are you now? That's when the this particular document right here, Mandate of Leadership, that's when it first began. So that would mean that even in light of some of the recent events, current President Joe Biden, he announces that, okay, with wisdom, I'm going to acquiesce to some of the calls from my particular political party and the people in my administration. I'm going to go ahead and yield to what they are saying. They are saying I need to step down. I'm going to do that. Now, he's stepping down from the presidential race. Okay? He still has to fulfill his duties all the way to January 20th, 2025, as he hands the reins over to the next chief executive. Okay? So he has to keep going through COVID, through whatever else is going on right now. I know that we haven't seen him, but this has to keep going. Now, even though there was a shift that happened, this right here it's been under development for all of these years for the entirety of some lives of millennials. This document has been able to have its formation and then also be edited, thought through, and all these other different things. So I want you to think about that. This didn't just come up overnight. There are four pillars. There are four pillars. I want you to look at this. You can read through it yourself. There are four major pillars of the current mandate for leadership, the conservative promise. That's the name of the sequel. That's what people are asking about today. Okay? It is to collectively pave the way for an effective conservative administration. Number one, you have the policy agenda. Now, it's building on the legacy of the mandate for leadership. It's telling you right there that there is something else that this is pointing to. So if you really want to understand what has happened or what this is standing upon, you need to go back. You need to go back decades in order to find out what this is. So, hey, and here's another thing. Number one, the policy agenda, number one, is telling us in the first pillar that not only do you need to go back to the mandate for leadership, you got to find out what the context was to understand, to fully understand why that happened in the first place. So that means one would have to research the context of the 1960s and the 70s in order to even understand the 80s. 1981, that is. Okay. And there are some things like when we talk about the Heritage Foundation, because we're going to have to talk about the Heritage Foundation. We'll go through the kind of the corridors of time. And we'll go back and talk a little bit about the 60s. We'll talk about the 70s so that we can put in proper perspective. Okay, Heritage Foundation, you know, its inception, what it was after, and things of that nature. And so it's a comprehensive policy guide for the incoming presidential administration. It will offer specific proposals for every major issue facing the country, pulling from the expertise of the entire conservative movement. And when it says the entire conservative movement, it means the absolute entire conservative movement. There are so many webs, I cannot cover all of them. When I show you a few strands of the web, then you're gonna see how massive this is. This is serious business. This is serious business. This is an organized effort from people who are structured. This is not some kind of sloppy manifesto. This is something that is meaning business. For those who agree and for those who disagree, it does not matter. So when you see it and you see how organized it is, not only that, you see how organized the document is. You have to go and it's like you almost have to go and see how those who the group, the individuals and also the groups, how structured they are, even in the various firms and associations that they lead. So it's yes, it's organized. And when they say they are pulling from the expertise of the entire conservative movement, they are talking. They really mean that. And when I say conservative, based on my research, when I say the entire conservative movement, that will be basically the response. So we're not really talking about the age old conservative movement from like way back in the Civil War or the antebellum South. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the response to the that which can be called the liberal, the era of liberalism, or even civil rights, or whatever that conservative side would end up pointing towards, that will cause this type of response from them in making the mandate for leadership in the first place. That's what we're talking about. So we're talking about the late 60s throughout the 70s. Okay? And so when you get into the 80s, then you start seeing the outworkings of that. You really begin to see the outworkings of it. So we go to pillar number 2, personal database. Or excuse me, I said personal database, personnel database. The most comprehensive policy agenda will have only limited impact without the right people in place to implement it. The project will cast a net across the country to identify conservatives from all walks of life to serve in the next conservative administration. And so as this particular segment, this introductory segment, as it progresses, then that's when you're going to see, okay, when they mean that they're casting a net out, and then they'll draw in for number 3, they'll draw in for the purpose of number 3, they'll gather their personnel database, and then they'll be able to sift each individual into their educational domain, which basically takes us to number 3. So just hang on to the personnel database. Just hang on to that. That is important. You'll just have to see some of the individual from whom potentially, I would say potentially, that the Project 2025, or the group of conservatives, this particular leadership group, who they would end up drawing from. So number 3 is pretty much like a university. You turn the talent pool into effective conservative administrators. The project will bring together experts who have served in prior administrations and can share their knowledge through workshops, seminars, online videos, and mentorship. So the online education, the physical workshops, and I mean, they're going to be utilizing technology to the highest degree. You name it. Anything that you delivering education in the most, of course, in a conservative way, but it's going to be in the most relevant way, in that which is the most impactful, utilizing technology to the highest degree. And so we move from that point, the 180-day playbook. So you have the policy agenda. It is what it is. The policy agenda is there. You have the personnel database. So if someone is deceased, someone needs to fill that within the next 4 years, they'll be able to pull from that. If someone needs to fill in this because someone else dropped out, someone else has decided to, just move on or anything of that nature. Of course, like this, it's a big deal. It works just like that. Very organized, very structured. Personnel database, you move to the training. Then after that, you get the 180-day playbook. That's the fourth pillar. And so notice the urgency. Notice the urgency. The time is short. That dependent clause right there, that says a lot. The time is short. And conservatives need a plan. The project will create a playbook of actions to be taken in the first 180 days of the new administration to bring quick relief to Americans suffering from the left's devastating policies. You hear that language? All of these paragraphs here, they come from, so this is exactly the wording. So this is verbatim here. Six months. Here's the thing, the power of lobbying. This is the part that a lot of people forget. So if you have, so let's say, for example, you have liberal president, you have a liberal, you have a moderate, then you're going to have lobbyists who are going to come in there and they're going to vie for their position. Lobbying had gotten so out of hand some years ago until, huge incentives and financial packages were offered to politicians on both the local, state, and federal level, that certain rules in various states had to be applied because they were just too powerful. They were coming too hard. The lobbyists, they were coming too hard. They would bring their money. They would have these wonderful dinners, and I mean, the things that would be talked about in those meetings, due to all the gifts and all these different things that the politician would be graced with. I mean, it's hard to turn away what the group is offering as a suggestion that they want the leader to put into play as far as the policy is concerned. And that will go on the local and also the state level. Okay? And I know that there are a number of political analysts who are probably like, yep, that is definitely true. That's definitely true. Lobbying to that degree does happen and has happened. And so the question is, what do you do? How do you respond? That's the question, because you have people who are, if they don't have some kind of state rule that's holding them back, then hey, you're gonna have all these gifts. You're gonna have these big dinners, and at times they are private. These large banquet halls. And then next thing you know, you're gonna have a nice letter, sometimes a document worth a number of 100 pages. Then what are you going to do? Well, you're going to have someone to read through that document, and you're going to need to deal with that. Or they may, but who knows, due to the power of that particular lobbying group, who knows what they'll do as far as your term or your administration is concerned. So political leaders, they have to be they have to be watchful and mindful of lobbyists. And so One of the ways when you have, and just like I said, you can have liberal, you can have conservative. One of the ways, even though you have the admin plan for 47, right? Donald Trump's plan for his administration. He comes in there and he says, okay, this is what I'm bringing to the table. This is what we're going to do. Then you have powerful lobbyists, and many of whom formerly worked with Trump, and they frequent his many places across the world. I mean, they come in there, and then they say, hey, we want to focus on this. They already know him. The friendship is already there. And then you have the friendship, and then after that you have the finances to just kind of fuel all these other different things. Rules are going to be rules, of course, but lobbying, 180-day playbook, and then communicating to people. We're talking about Fortune 500 leaders. We're talking about like even someone as Forbes, like from the Forbes magazine. Well, you'll see his name in this particular document. Forbes. So you have people who are powerful. You have people who are several attorneys, many of whom are several attorneys. And they could be a part of the lobbying group that will help move things along in the first 6 months. There is something that I'm going to share here, and it's a reason why I'm placing emphasis on the 6 months, because it's something that I want you to get. Okay, we're gonna go through it later, but you're gonna see how fast things can be implemented, especially when you lobby. So let's move along to the Heritage Foundation. So we talked about what the mandate for leadership is. We talked about that. We talked about part 1, and then we talked about part 2. So you have mandate for leadership, part 1, 1981. And then you have mandate for leadership, the conservative promise, part 2, 2023. 2023. It was complete and the deal was sealed and it was published. So you have the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Foundation is pretty much it's like the main drive for conservatives. And so we really need to find out what the Heritage Foundation is. Once we find out what it is, and then you're going to see it just show up in so many different places as we go through the document. Okay. What is the Heritage Foundation? I define it as a research and also educational hub for Americans' conservative public policy. It is also a think tank, or some describe it as a think tank for conservatives. Okay? This is the place that will be pushing out all the material, the training, or much of the material and training. When you have the personnel database, and then having to go to it's almost like the Heritage Foundation University. Once you receive the training, and then you can be part of all these other different things that are gonna happen. Be a part of the administration, and in so many different areas across the nation. The Heritage Foundation is that's the educational hub that's going to be pushing through with these things. So you have us getting to the point of where we just kind of need to go back and think about what happened that would cause the Heritage Foundation to produce the mandate for leadership. So when you think about the 70s, as we go back into the corridors of time, you think about the 1970s. You think about the 1960s. Those were rough times. You know, you kind of think that, you think about those of us who are millennials, and it's what we saw from the period of, and of course during the Trump administration, over Obama's administration, going into the Trump administration, all the way up until what we see now. We've seen a lot. We've seen a lot. We've endured a pandemic. Okay. There was a great pandemic that happened a while ago, and there are some good books that are produced about that. But it devastated. I mean, it devastated America. It absolutely devastated America. And there was one book that I can't even think of the name right now. But you look at that pandemic and then compare it to the one that we face today. Millennials have been through that. You think about 2015, 2016, going all the way up until like 2021. And it's like being bombarded and just confronted by a lot regarding police shootings and just how, now I'm trying to say this and use euphemism so that I won't violate any of the rules and regulations that YouTube has. But there was a lot when you look at the police shootings, and then when you look at what was going on with black people during that time. And man, the fear that was instilled in people. And you look at social media, it seemed like almost once a week someone was getting gunned down some way or another. But you look at that, you look at how that was amplified through social media and all these other different entities. And then also the conspiracy of some of that coming from, internationally, I would say that. I mean, it was a lot. It was a whole lot. '60s and 1970s. You got the Superfly era, right? With the big Superfly, the big fly collars. You have that going on. Then you have the Vietnam War going on, right? That spawned from what we call the Indochina Wars. Something that was just some things that fell apart after World War II. So you have that, you got Vietnam. And then you have revolution. Black people all over the earth. I mean, literally all over planet Earth. Just bringing attention to the stuff that they're going through. I'm talking about from America, South America, you got Cuba, then you have Europe itself, and then you have Africa, and then you have people who are in the Negev, and then also Israel itself. So we're talking about black people specifically, and they're saying different things about how hey, we've been here this long, and people never even knew that we were here, but we've been here for this long, and they're protesting, they're holding up signs and all these other different things. I mean, that was something else. And so in the midst of that, you have, the hot rods that are being produced. It's almost, it kind of seemed like what's going on now, because you hear a lot of the loud sounds, the loud hot rods that are happening that have loaded the streets, the Dodge Chargers, this, that, and the other. And back in the day, you had these big blocks, these big engines being produced. You got the scrambler that's that's running like Daddy say, running like a scalded ape. You got the Pontiac GTO Judge. I mean, think about those times. You got the Camaro, you got the Chevelle. Then you got war. You got young people buying up these hot rods. Then you have revolution, people trying to start revolution on college campuses. Then you get into the 70s. Or you leave the 70s, but you think about it. Who did we lose? Who did we lose in the 60s? April 4th, 1968, Memphis, Tennessee, after he delivered his speech at the Mason Temple.
Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Think about Medgar Evers. You think about just so many different things. 60s, that was a tough time. Think about Jimmy Lee Jackson over in Selma. Mr. James Orange. Marion. Jimmy Lee Jackson, Marion, Alabama, and then Selma. And that's what caused the Selma to Montgomery March. You got lynchings that are occurring all over the place. Black people. And then add on top of that, add on all of that. Now I'm sure some of you are just like, wow, that took me down memory lane for real. Some of you are probably watching that and you're like, yep, I remember that. I remember this, I remember that. I remember when Malcolm X, I remember when he was killed in the announcement. I'm sure some of you remember that. You remember the Superfly era. You remember the cars. You remember Vietnam. You remember what was going on the university campus. And then add on to all of that the Oval Office with President Nixon with the Watergate scam, with the Watergate scandal, should I say. Now, here we go, lack of trust. Now, that was from the Republican Party. And so now people are looking sideways because knowing what was pitched about Dixiecrats and all, all these other different things that was going on, and you have the Republicans and the Democrats. They're trying to, you know, have a distinctive approach to all these social issues, and you have the welfare. It comes out, and it does what it does. The Democrats are coming out of a period to where the Ku Klux Klan coming out of that, and then everybody's trying to decide like, okay, where I'm about to go now, because I'm looking at how these political parties are trying to deal with this whole what they call the Negro issue or the Negro problem, and also what what is defined in literature and scholarship as the white man's burden. Like, what do we do with these people? They were enslaved, and now we're 100 years post emancipation. What do we do with them? You got the Black Panthers. You got that. I mean, guys, the 60s was something to deal with. Do you remember American Gangster? Denzel Washington. I mean, that was in that little bracket there. 60s, 70s, because you have things that are finishing up in Vietnam. Some stuff is about to happen with Saigon, Seoul Street, Vietnam. Yeah, that's that context. That's that context. You see that picture right there? That's that context. General Ford, he has a pass on the reins because he did what he did as far as the pardon for President Nixon. Now you got people looking at him sideways. And so, in addition, several black leaders had been destroyed by this point, leaving the black community with a void and a need to grow more leaders. And that was due to what had happened in the 60s, because now the 70s is in shambles. And all of a sudden, you have a new type of drug, a drug that was actually being utilized in Vietnam for our soldiers. It was actually to help our soldiers when they were injured or whatnot. That particular drug, it's now brought back over, and it's filled the streets. And that is about to set something up for the 1980s, when we have Nicaragua and all these other different things that came from that. But the 70s was they were at least able to see a certain type of narcotic, and it filled the streets. African Americans coming back from Vietnam, a number of them unable to get jobs, being unemployed. So, of course, the welfare system is set up. The welfare system is set up. Lyndon B. Johnson, he was able to set that system, get that going, and now you have it to where African American men are discouraged, should we say, from being present in the home. And that there were certain songs that were done in the front of the house or in the little where the children would play. When the social worker would show up, there were songs that would be sung, because Africans, it's just that Africanness that's instilled in black people. To where it's like, hey, I'm gonna sing this song, but I'm communicating something. I'm telling you to leave. And so whenever the social worker would show up, you would have that song to be performed. And then that's when, if the dad was inside, he would know to go. He would know to go out the back door, so that when the social worker would show up, do the evaluation, then they would see, okay, we can give you your payment. You're approved. You don't have a man in the house. That's reasonable. Okay, now I can move to the next house. Okay, and see, that was done out of survival. So you have the man to go off to Vietnam, come back, and then now this occurred in a number of projects. But there are some areas didn't get touched by that. There were some in different areas, like let's say for example where I'm from, the men who went off to the boys who went off to Vietnam and came back, you know, they were able to get jobs. They were able to get jobs for some of the chemical plants where we were from. So it would be a tad bit different for the particular African Americans who grow up in the city where I'm from. But other than that, you would have what you would have wreaking havoc in a number of the projects and various other places throughout the nation. African American men are distraught and they're just like, oh my gosh, I can't find a job. I feel plagued that I can't even provide because of the discrimination, all these other different things. And so what happens? They turn to narcotics just to be able to deal with that reality. And so once again, that's not for all black men. That would be for a number of black men. So over time, you would begin to see a shift. There was a change that would happen over time, and the black man would feel unempowered all of a sudden because you got to think post-emancipation, he was able to he over time due to Reconstruction, the black man was able to take hold of a number of different opportunities and build businesses and all these other different things, just like they built Centennial Hill. They built a Black Wall Street right here in Montgomery, Alabama. There were black, if you do the inflationary calculators, there were black millionaires who were here living in downtown Montgomery, and they built a thriving Wall, like their own little Wall Street called Centennial Hill, and they had Alabama State University on the backside of it. And on the very front side of it was Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, which is the church that Charles Octavius Booth built, that he founded, that he planted. But then Dr. Martin Luther King ended up becoming very popular for that. Okay? Those things began to change because that was back in the 1800s, going into the early 1900s. But then when you get up to the 60s, stuff just started changing. And then you had black American men feeling unempowered. Okay? And so they're turning to different groups. And then you had gangs to form. There were gangs that formed to kind of provide some type of solution, some type of answer to what was going on. Okay? So you would have what would be, God, I don't want to do full commentary on it, but the different groups that will form in these major metropolitan areas throughout America. Some of the younger people, they would be spearheading that, and they were trying to basically protect the community. So the Black Panther Party, it ended up starting right here in Lowndes County. Lowndes County, Alabama is the county that borders Montgomery to the south. Okay? So you have all this going on within these 2 decades. When you go back and listen to the music of the time, Motown, and some of the sounds from Philadelphia, you'll see what they were facing in the producers. They were putting that stuff in the music. Like, this is what's going on. Now, in the 80s, you're going to see something totally different. Late 70s and the early 80s, you're going to see something being inserted in the music to address the time then. But Motown and a number of other T-Neck records by the Isley Brothers and the Philadelphia sound with the OJs and Teddy Pendergrass and all those guys, you're gonna hear quite a bit. And then you have Malaco, of course, Mississippi, Alabama record company. Malco Records. You had Johnny Taylor on that, and a few others. Sam Cooke. You look at what Sam Cooke developed, how he was able to develop his own. You had so many black artists, and not only that, you had the rock and roll. The rock and roll was even talking about, look, some folks are born with silver spoon in hand. Lord, don't they feed themselves? Ball of Confusion coming out of Motown, or produced for Motown. Let me say that. Ball of Confusion. Go back and listen to that track. Marvin Gaye's Mercy, Mercy Me. Marvin Gaye talked about a lot of stuff. 1971. And then when we talk about the, how could I say this? The S*X Revolution. S*X Revolution. It's your thing. Do what you want to do. I can't tell you who to sock it to. (1971) and 1970 tracks. Heritage Foundation is responding to something. Now, this is relevant information right here. Oh, wait. Let me go back. Because, see, this is a point here. This is a point here that even if you miss this, you can take that slider on YouTube and slide to this point here. But understand this. We also need to keep in mind, I don't have this here, so you're going to have to like really pay attention to what I'm saying. That the Presbyterian Church formed in 1973. So look at right here, 1970 and 1971. The Presbyterian Church of America formed in 1973 over conservative and liberal perspectives that was within their own domain, their own Presbyterian context, the Presbyterian Church of the United States. Or what we call the PCUSA, Presbyterian Church of the United States of America. So the larger Presbyterian, I mean, they were what they were at one point. And you had smaller groups who had broken off, but they were dealing with the same thing. They were dealing with the same stuff. How do we deal with, hey, what's going on out there in the context of the secular domain it's influencing us here inside of the confines of our church. How do we respond to this? How do we respond? We've been predominantly Caucasian. We've been able to maintain a very pure social context, church context, and have African Americans out. We've been able to, or Black Americans, or African Americans, Black Americans, whatever they call them during that time. Of course, well, they call them Negroes during the time. But we've been able to keep them out. First Pres of Montgomery, Alabama. This is the church where Dr. James Marion Sims was a member. We call it nicknamed First Pres. Some people call it the notorious First Pres, the notorious First Presbyterian. And why was it called Notorious First Presbyterian Church in downtown Montgomery? That was next door to First Baptist of Montgomery. Well, it's because all you have to do is just go and do some basic research. And they've relocated and, trying to rebrand themselves right now, of course. But when you look at them back in the 1950s, hey, First Pres was no joke. They were like, no, we want to make it clear that black people are not allowed in our congregation. We want to make it clear, and we stand on that. And you see a problem with that? You see a problem with us putting them out? You have a problem, because God has ordained it this way. It's supposed to be this way. Those are lesser likes. Those are, I mean, of course, the view was still going on during the time because a lot of literature was being circulated. Not only was Darwinism what it was in the secular domain, but Darwin was inspired by what he was inspired by, but Darwinism was also inspiring. The different facets of Darwinism was inspiring the ecclesiastical domain. So that's why First Presbyterian Church of Montgomery, Alabama, downtown Montgomery specifically, right there across from the AT&T building. That's why it had the stance that it had, and it was looking at everyone, anyone who would challenge them as liberal, like you're liberal. So if you're gonna ask us to include Black Americans, then that's gonna be that new stuff. That's that new stuff. As a matter of fact, God has ordained it to be this way. We are the cream of the crop. We are God's chosen. So why would we have to bend the knee to this new stuff, this new liberal agenda, with you trying to get those Black Americans? You see that Black American Rosa Parks. You see what she's done to the bus system, and you see what all these other different things are going on. I mean, they have their own institutions. Let them stay over there. They have that new institution for the Black people that moved from Marion, the Lincoln Normal School, moved from Marion, and now it's right behind us, at the backside of Centennial Hill, not that far from us. Yeah, that's their institution. They now call that place Alabama State University. That's their institution. So you let those guys deal with that. We have our own stuff going on. You understand? We have our Sanford University. We have our other different places where we can get educated. We have Auburn. We have, I think Faulkner University may have been around during that time. But they had their local PWIs, and so for that to be integrated, and for a church like First Pres to be integrated, man, that was a stretch. That was an absolute stretch. So you have to, guys, you have to understand the content. This is why. This is why. This is why this is a study. Because we have to plunge deep into these issues. You have to understand this kind of stuff to better comprehend why you see some of this other stuff to happen in the 80s. Why did the Heritage Foundation, why did they respond in the way that they responded? Why some of these other places that we talk about, why did the Presbyterians go through what they went through? Why did, at the same time, the Southern Baptist Convention, why did it was about to split again? They split in 1845. The General Baptists, they were just called Baptists. And then you had, over the Civil War in 1845, the Northern Baptists to split. Well, I'm sorry, the Southern Baptists split from the General Baptist group. They come over here long ago for religious freedom because of being persecuted. Then come over here, and now they're like, look, we want to thrive off of some of this persecution that we're doing against Black people. And the Southern Baptist Convention was formed. And listen, for any who would challenge the persecution of Black people, of Black Christians, yes, that was going on, is very well documented. Very, very, very well documented. Okay? So slavery, that was a part of capitalizing on, the persecution of Black Christians. Now, there was support that was going on in a lot of different ways. There was a lot of support. But it was a lot of, hey, you get back there in the balcony when the support was had. Now, I mean, yeah, we can look at this book. We can look at this book as well for that. The Democratic Religion talks about the Baptists from 1785 to 1900. So, hey, if we need sources and well-documented sources with footnotes, so don't make me go there now. All right now, you stay put. So we can go there, and we can go there with this. Okay, this is about the conservative resurgence. So you had the Baptists who split in 1845. The Southern Baptists wanted to keep slaves. And then they also, because of 1845, that means that they inspired the Civil War to happen due to some of the ideologies and then also false teaching. Yes, false teaching. It was based off of false renderings of Scripture. Okay? Because that's the only way that you can enslave your fellow man the way that it was done. So that means that the Imago Dei, things of that nature, the doctrine had to be marred. And passages had to be ignored. And scripture had to be twisted in order for slavery, due to the degree that it was had in this way, to continue. Okay? Conservative resurgence. So you had the Presbyterians to go through what they went through with the PCA, and they're trying to decide on, they're working through what they're working through. But then you also have the conservative resurgence to happen, to where you have a group of moderates that is in the context of and this is in the Southern Baptist group. You know, the Baptists, Southern Baptists are just trying to find out, like, oh my gosh, we have these seminaries. We think that there are some who are not dealing with scripture the right way in some of our seminaries that we support through the cooperative program, and this, that, and the other, and we need to fire this one, we need to do this. Man, there was so much going on. Paige Patterson, and you know, you got Falwell, you have Adrian Rogers, Charles Stanley. Okay, you may see him on TV, you may have seen him on TV, you may have grown up with him, you know, walking through your parents' house, and then you saw Charles Stanley, Adrian Rogers playing on Sunday before going to church or whatnot. Okay, in the 80s and in the 90s. Some of you probably remember that. Well, some of those guys were involved in the conservative resurgence, and that was actually during that time. So when you were, if you were a millennial, you were walking through your parents' living room and you remember seeing them on TV, that was during the time of the conservative resurgence. So being a conservative and a liberal, okay, and what side you stood on and how you're going to deal with this new thing that's going on, man, that was huge. That was the talk of the day. That was a talk. That was a talk in many churches. That was a talk in the secular realm. When we're talking about politics, the Democrats, the Republicans, the Watergate scandal. How are we going to deal with liberation theology? With black people saying what they're saying about, you know, being liberated. Now you have some talking about, you have James Cone. Then you have this one, and you have that one. You got Jeremiah Wright. That's that time period. Liberation theology. That's also in the period of the 60s and 70s. Think with me now. Think and follow through. Y'all still good out there? So if you don't know anything about the conservative resurgence, what was going on in the ecclesiastical domain, you're missing you're missing something. If you're just thinking about the secular domain, then you're missing something. Because you have to understand that the president, the ecclesiastical domain has always been powerful. It has never lacked power. So that's exactly why some of the presidents will have to call up leaders from these ecclesiastical ecclesiastical groups, these denominations, Southern Baptist, Presbyterian, to find out, like going to different meetings and stuff like that, going to dinners, and you know, you have to understand the whole context. It's multifaceted. It's not. I don't think it's as simple as people think. No, there were so many different things going on. I.e., a lot of the musical tracks of the day. Okay. Now let's move on to this. So this is something else I want you to understand about the conservative, about the Heritage Foundation and what they were responding to a research. So, well, I just read that. So coming out of the aforementioned era, so that would be the compilation of years, the 60s and the 70s. Coming out of that, and the S star X revolution was going on with that too. So you have people who are dealing with that. You're dealing with hippies. You're dealing with experimenting with all these different narcotics, things being brought back from Vietnam. So the Heritage Foundation produced a 20-volume, 3,000-page governing handbook containing more than 2,000 conservative policies to reform the federal government. The Mandate for Leadership was published in January 1981, the same month Ronald Reagan was sworn into his presidency. And listen at this. This is the part that I wanted you to be in tune to. Pay attention. By the end, this is due to lobbying. This is due to lobbying. Do you hear me? By the end of that year, more than 60% of its recommendations had become policy. So, of course, the Reagan administration, I mean, he's an actor. He's an entertainer, you know. Reagan, former entertainer. So it's kind of like Trump, you know. Trump had his TV shows, experience, you know, he's been able to enjoy decades and decades of wealth coming from the family that he comes from. This is Elizabeth's, I call him Lizzie's grandbaby. Elizabeth Trump's grandbaby. So you have two entertainers. Ronald Reagan, a movie star. He goes into the presidency, and then he has someone to say, you know what, let's go out and talk. Let's, you know, we have let's come on out to this dinner. We want to treat you to something. However that played out. So you have lobbying, and understand that there were rules and regulations that are in place today to restrict certain lobbying endeavors. Those were not in place during that time. They were not in place during that time. So whatever meetings happened with Reagan, as soon as Reagan stepped into office, I mean, you think about it, the man just barely had the opportunity to breathe. It was that January, and then they say, here you go. And so You remember when this said the time is short, pillar number 4, 180-day playbook, and conservatives need a plan. See that right there, second, the column to the right. By the end of that year, 1981, more than 60% of its recommendations had become policy. Did not waste time. Organized, structured. Just as it is voluminous now, the work, I mean, you got 900 pages now. Oh, it was voluminous then. Okay. So that means that they had the publishing, their publishing house had already done its work. So that means that they were already doing meetings and talk throughout the 60s and the 70s. So by the time 1981 hit, boom, here you go. They already had it together. So it's just been watching things play out through the Obama administration, through Biden's administration, and even Trump's administration. But at this point, it's just watching things. And now it's like, hey, let's regroup. And then this right here was finished in 2023. This was complete in 2023, so we're late. We're late to the party. Okay? Four fronts. This is more than likely something that we're going to talk about. We'll be discussing in a live, just to kind of get some ideas, see where some people are. And thank you to those of you who have liked. You've subscribed to YouTube. You've liked TikTok. You become a follower of Montgomery Deep History TikTok account. And then you've also gone over to YouTube and subscribe to the Montgomery Deep History YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate that, guys. Share, continue to share, get the word out. But TikTok that's going to be a place where we're going to do lives, and whenever the capability is for YouTube, whenever it opens up, because I know that due to the progress of this, there are going to be a lot of subscribers. There's going to be a lot of traffic. It's going to be a lot of traffic. So we'll be doing lives. We just want to see what's out there. What are people thinking? How are people processing, especially processing this stuff right here? Because these are some of the concerns of conservatives and concerns of liberals. Do we need to, and understand here, the foci is on liberal agenda. I'm sorry, on a conservative agenda and conservative plans. And so, is family, the traditional family, is it reasonable? Or should family be redefined? Restore family as a centerpiece of American life and protect children? How do different people groups, how do they view family nowadays? If you tear family down, does that have repercussions for us nationally that we may not want? Like, let's say, for example, with some of the things that we see in homes. Some homes don't have parents. There are some homes even around our city, and they don't have parents. Like there's no one there. There are children who are raising themselves. They're taking themselves to school and everything. Yes, there have been several, who found they've been raising themselves for years. They didn't have mother, father, grandmother, or anything. And as far as we know, that it has only been Black American, as far as we know. Now, there may have been some Caucasians who have been in that same position, but for the ones that we have known of, they have been Black children who were raising themselves, and then they also had younger siblings that they were raising as well. So you kind of wonder, like, how are you getting food? How are you, Are you cleaning and all this other different sanitation and all these other different things? Or when we have only a father who's trying to raise the children, or only a mother who's trying to raise the children, should we, since that dynamic is there, is that considered healthy? Is should the family be that way? Should family be like reversed? Should you have a different combination? Should you, since you can have one parent, and maybe an argument can be put forward that that looks that can survive. You know, when we're talking about being pragmatic, that goes well. So you see these women and they're able to handle business and do everything else, work a job, and also raise children. So should we advocate for another combination other than the one that has always been known, which would be a man and a woman, husband and wife coming together and and having family structured that way, husband, wife, children? Or should we put something else in there, some other element? The administrative state, dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American. So whenever you hear anything about deep state, deep state, deep state, that was a term that was recently a term that was kind of brought into our vocabulary nowadays. I would say it's just a few years in the making. The deep state, okay, it's mainly is suggesting, hey, the federal government, they have too much say so, they have their hands in too much, and we need them back out so that we can return back to full blown states' rights. States need to govern themselves, and it needs to be, let's go back to what let's respect the Constitution, and let's say, hey, due to what those fellas came from, the framers, what they came from across the waters, and they saw how persecution can happen in all these different ways, and how religion can end up having its hands in there, and how you can have a big, humongous federal government, and it just, it just places a hammer on the smaller local governments around England, around the British territory. Like, should we have that, or should we build this thing to where we have, like, listen, no, we need to, due to what we come from over across the waters, we need to have a small federal government, and we need these states, the local side especially, to govern themselves. The administrative state. Dismantle it and return to self-governance. That's what that is. National sovereignty. Defend our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats. I'm just thinking about some things. There's a number of things that's going through my mind right there. We'll have to come to that. We'll go to that when we look at some of these other different things that's coming up. We'll kind of talk about some of those things. Individual rights. Secure our God-given individual rights to live freely, what our Constitution calls the blessings of liberty. Okay? So you want to look at all these different things and pair that with the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So what it's saying is we want that again, but the way we get there is right over here. We need the administrative state. You're going to see how this stuff plays together. When we start covering these chapters, your mind is going to go back to this, and you're more than likely going to have to use this, since this one is so extensive. And look at how much time. You look at the slider, you see that we've already scored about an hour and a half. You're gonna find yourself coming back here, because some of these slides you won't be able to see them, You won't be able to see them because I may or may not have it, because we'll be covering so many other different things. I may or may not have these slides in the future chapters. So you're gonna find yourself coming back here. It's gonna work like an index for you. So you have states' rights. That in turn get the federal government get its hands out of every little thing, give the states more freedom, and allow the states to even deal with things as simple as civil rights, right? So like the Shelby Holder situation that happened up in Shelby County, Alabama. Make sure you research that, please. Shelby versus Holder. Shelby County versus Holder. Supreme Court case, and it was dealing with the civil rights issue. I think clause 5C. No, was it clause 4C? They wanted to deal with that particular clause, and so it had to do with voting. And then in Calera, Alabama, which is also in Shelby County. I was actually living in Shelby County during that time when it happened. It was very interesting. And then you had the Black American voters who were, they were disappointed. They were very disappointed. Well, when you have the administrative state, when you have it to, have the states to govern itself, then you do end up, you have to be watchful of things like that. You have to be watchful of gerrymandering. You have to be watchful of like with the lines that were recently drawn in Alabama as far as redistricting for voting purposes. You have to be mindful of that when we're talking about states' rights. That's just something to be mindful of. And so then what is, when you look at national sovereignty, that is what it is, because federal government needs to do what it needs to do. But administrative state being dismantled, states' rights, and then we go back to the individual rights, because you're going to have lobbyists who are going to be going to their local and then the local and state level, and so they'll end up taking care of that, thereby returning things back, returning things kind of close to where it was during the era of Reagan. Okay, almost like I don't know if we could say a conservative utopia, but get as close as possible to what's laid out in the mandate for leadership. Now with the things that you're about to see, this is a quote from Paul Dans and Steve Groves. They wrote the introduction for the mandate for leadership, the conservative promise, and this is what they said, and I quote, "Our work is by no means a comprehensive compendium of conservative policies, nor is our group the exclusive cadre of conservative thinkers. The ideas expressed in this volume are not necessarily shared by all. What unites us is the drive to make our country better." So the saying right there, that means that what I'm about to show you, it does not, the mandate for leadership, even though you saw the 4 pillars, even though you saw those 4 pillars, and then you also saw where you saw the 4 pillars, and then you saw some of the other things that we saw. Mainly the 4 pillars is what I'm talking about, because the 4 pillars is what encapsulates the whole thing. It's the plan. All conservatives will not agree. That's what this is saying. All conservatives are not going to agree. But we are going to be unified. That's what they're saying. Paul Dans, Steve Groves saying, we as conservatives, and I have to put myself in their shoes, we as conservatives, we're not going to agree on every jot and tittle of what is written in the conservative, in the mandate for leadership, the conservative promise. So when we get into let me regather myself really quick. When we get into the span of reach, I want to show you something that you can think about as we look at the different conservatives who are attached to Project 2025 and the organizations that they lead. So we'll go to the Project 2025 page itself, and then we'll just kind of go from there. And then I'll share a couple other things that may end up being so. The thing is that the net is to be cast all over the nation, and then draw from that net the conservatives who will end up building or be placed inside of the personnel database. Okay? All of them are not named where you see contributors, where you see contributors, or if you see authors in the Project 2025 page, that particular page that deals with the names, don't think that that's all there is. You will have been terribly mistaken if you think that that's it. No, you have to go to the advisory board. And then if you don't have a working knowledge, if you haven't been reading and understanding the larger web of things, you're going to have a sense of confusion as to what's what. And you will look at this as like, oh, there is no way that they'll be able to take the Oval Office and come November and then January because Harris just raised this much money. So, and look at Trump. Look at how much money they have, and look at how much money and look at some of his requests and what he's talking about with the reimbursement. Oh, they're scared. You can tell they're going to lose this. Yeah, be careful. You got to be very careful because this is organization here. This is almost edging up on 50 years. I mean, it's 40. It's of course it's 40. You know, it's a millennial. It's around the age of the millennials. So you're talking about 4 good decades here. It's getting real close to 50. And so don't mistake this as being some unorganized thing, and then the names that are in there, that that's all there is. Let me show you something real quick. So if we go to the About tab and we go to Advisory Board, the Advisory Board, these are the organizations that are here. These organizations have been in place for a long, long time. You see a university, you see Liberty University there. You see, I mean, you see quite a few. James Madison Institute. We're going to go to Dr. James Dobson Family Institute. Okay. Owen Strachan. You see him there because he is the senior director for Dobson Culture Center. Okay. So that's just one strand. I just went in and picked one. See there? And here's another. If we go back to We go to public policy and we go to recent news and notice that the former President Trump said that he doesn't know about, he's denied knowing about Project 2025. He attended a Christian conference recently. This is July 3rd, and he's already he's already talking about a number of these things at some of the Christian conferences. Okay. So meetings are happening. There are things that are already being formed. Let's look at something else. So you have what his name, Owen Strawn, who is he's the director of the Dobson Center of Culture. I think that's what it said. Dr. James Dobson, the Family Institute Christian radio show host, and he's written a number of books, and he's built this particular institution here. Dr. James Dobson Family Institute. Now there's something else called the Social Justice and the Gospel. So this was something that formed back in like 2018, and a group of conservatives came together, and they were just and based on the word and the way the word woke, how it ended up getting intermingled into just today's context, woke and wokeness. Well, Christian conservatives came together and they said, "Hey, we're gonna meet, and we are going to establish something that is going to help us to deal with this, whatever this is about woke or wokeness, wokeism." And so they met, and then there were just a few of them. You're gonna see the names of some of the ones who initially met. They met around lunch or something like that. And then after that, they took it further, and they were just like, "Hey, we're gonna open this up to Christian conservatives all over the world who want, like from Australia to Canada to, Christians all over the globe. If you're dealing with this like South Africa, if you're dealing with this wokeism or wokeness, and you want to stop that, and you want to contend for the gospel of Christ, then sign your name on this petition." And this is across many denominations, so it's not denomination specific, but conservative Christians all over the globe, they ended up placing their name here, and you're going to end up seeing Strawn. You're going to end up seeing Owen Strawn here. So this is something else that you probably would never be able to connect this from Dr. James Dobson's family organization. So there are affirmations and denials. It talks about social justice, talk about the perspective. So you see those names there. Okay, you got Tom Buck, Tom Askell. You have a few Costi Hand, Benny Hand. If you're familiar with Benny Hand, that's his nephew. Owen Strawn, there he is, right there. And there are a few names, quite a few names here. Douglas Wilson. Some may be familiar with Doug Wilson from Moscow, Idaho. There are more names. And you can become a signer. You hit that tab. But if you want to view the actual names, then you get to view all the names. And this has been established since 2018. And this is global. Goes on, keeps going. Social justice and the gospel. Some of you may ask for a link or something. Just type in social justice and the gospel, and that page should come up from Google. And you see all these organizations, these fellowships, and these churches. Those organizations have signed their name, and they're dealing with they're dealing with civil rights, social justice warriors, or what they call social justice warriors, and also wokeism. Okay, what is called wokeism, or being woke. They have that verbiage in there, and they have these different affirmations that, hey, affirmation number 1, we're going to deal with scripture. Affirmation number 2, we're going to deal with justice. Affirmation number that's they're going about it like that. I'm not saying that it's in that actual order, okay? But if you go there and then you go back and look at the different affirmations, that's what these signers are agreeing to. So they're signing their name. Now I will say this, even though, just like the author said, all the conservatives are not going to agree on everything that's in Project 2025. But out of the 17, close to 18,000 names that are here in the organization, you got to think about the individuals, their individual names. And then you have to think about because some of them are putting their occupation. They're putting like what they do. Those organizations have, some of them hundreds, some of them thousands. And then if you put all those together, you have multiple thousands. So we're talking about just within the nation, because it says it's going to be a draw throughout the nation to build a personnel database. So when you have that, you're going to end up, it's very likely you're going to end up having some of these individuals from these organizations and churches. And this is multiple thousands. And if you go to the 17,000 names and you look at those names, you have attorneys, you have individuals who run large, successful firms across America. Some of them even have their firms across the globe. So the finances are there. The income, when you're talking about conservatives, the finances are there, the income is there, the structure is there, the organization is there. So when we go to one of the names, one was Owen Strachan, and then another signer is Doug Wilson. Now Doug Wilson is an interesting individual because he defines himself as a Confederate, but a certain type of Confederate is a paleo Confederate. So you think about paleontologists, you get in your mind that, hey, this is more like dinosaur type Confederate. He's just saying that he's one of the ones who would have the same mindset as the Confederates from who like the originals, okay? The ones who were looking towards the Civil War when the Civil War had not occurred. He distinguishes himself from today's neo-Confederates. Yeah, so he is looking at the Constitution a certain way. The Constitution, and then he's looking at Lincoln a certain way as well. So he's looking at Lincoln as, hey, the amendments that you brought about, it ended up pulling or restricting the Constitution in ways that it should not have been restricted. That's with those amendments, like with the slave amendments, with the provisions that were there, and that limits the Constitution. Whereas if you go prior to the Civil War, and the fuss that was being made. You remember the caning that happened in the Carolinas. There was a book that was written about the caning, um, the perspective that was being defended there about the Constitution. This is what he's talking about. He's talking about defending that perspective, and he's a signer on the social justice and gospel page, and he's he's Paleo Confederate, and he is also a leader of like a classical Christian school group, or and what I would say a collective of classical Christian schools throughout America. And that would be the Association of Classical Christian Schools, the ACCS, and ACCS conference, and all these other different things. He's the leader of that, and he may still be the leader of that. But not only so, those are multiple schools, multiple home schools, and then multiple schools, actual campuses that are throughout the United States. And so, of course, you know that influence is there, and then also a pastor as well. And then there's a seminary, okay, New St. Andrew's College. There's a seminary that is there, all under his leadership. So let's take a look at this as well when we're looking at the names. A few of these names that I spoke of. Robert Borton's Classical Conversations. So this is a homeschool group. Once again, it's national. It's like a classical Christian homeschool group. A little bit different than the ACCS. Okay. And so Robert Bortons Jr., the CEO, he has his name as what I think his name was under the contributors list on Project 2025. So we went directly to Project 2025, and you see his name right there. So those are some of the. So, and again, he's a leader of this particular organization, and it has homeschool groups all over the United States. And this is something that is interesting. So this is to expand your mind a lot more, so that you won't think that, hey, the conservative thing is just old Confederate Caucasians. But when you see here, Briarwood Presbyterian Church, now this page here, this is campus outreach. So this is campus outreach. This is something. Campus outreach was birthed out of Briarwood Presbyterian Church, and the pastor here, the late Harry Reeder, who recently passed away, he was known to show up at a number of Confederate gatherings, and so like that was nothing surprising. You remember when we talked about the Presbyterian Church of America and how, so this is 2016. You remember when we talked about the Presbyterian Church of America and how it actually formed in the early 70s? Well, it actually formed in Briarwood Presbyterian Church, where he was the pastor. So, and as you see him here, he's at honoring General Jackson and General Robert E. Lee at a Confederate memorial. So he frequented those. The sons and daughters of the Confederacy. He was very familiar with those particular organizations, descendants of the Confederate soldiers, and just what their attempt to remember their loved ones And not only that, but you also think about the school curriculum and all these other things that happened back in the early 1900s. When you look at the Sons and Daughters of the Confederacy as like an organization and their sphere of influence. So, just to kind of tie some of this stuff together, the Classical Conversations homeschool group, you have there are some black families who are also under that. Okay, a number of them conservative values. They share conservative values. We're talking about black families here. Okay, there are some black families even in Alabama. Same thing. They share those conservative values. So even though they're Confederate counterparts, if you would, are there and they still do their thing, some of the values are shared, and we'll see some of these things as we go through the study when we dig in some of the chapters. But there were some Black Americans, for example, just to get a little more specific. There were some Black Americans in Alabama, some of the ones who used the Classical Conversations homeschool group. There are some who were influenced by a discipleship program on HBCU campuses, Alabama State University, which we have been talking about, and also Tuskegee University. So what you saw earlier, the ministry campus outreach that was birthed out of Briarwood Presbyterian Church, and Briarwood Presbyterian Church was actually the birth of in Birmingham, Alabama, was the birth of the Presbyterian Church of America denomination to cling to, conservative values. You had those two universities, Tuskegee and Alabama State, being influenced by a discipleship program, campus outreach on those campuses. And so you also had Reformed University Fellowship on Alabama A&M. That's a historical black college as well. That's a Presbyterian ministry that came from the PCA, the Presbyterian Church of America. And so once again, campus outreach was birthed out of Briarwood. And as you saw it, we have the pastor who frequented these Confederate meetings. And so some of those values are there. I just wanted to put that out there for you, just so that you can understand that, just so that you can just kind of expand your mind here. Like the conservative movement or the conservative collective, well, it's not just older individuals, specifically men, who have these old, archaic, like rustic type of views or perspective, and they are the only ones who are in this group. And those who pass that down to their sons, they're the only ones in the conservative group. No, there are also Christian groups who have, due to like attempts such as Briarwood's influence through campus outreach, they have been able to train and disciple different individuals who are African American on various campuses. And some of them may not even cling to, conservative values now. Some of them may. Some of them may not. But the thing is that there are some who do. And they're not just in Alabama, because those are universities. That means they're all over the place. So be more expansive. If we do address something, we have to be we have to give like a fair presentation. We have to give a fair presentation of it. Okay? So it's not just old Caucasian men. There are black Americans who are all over the nation, and they're a part of the conservative movement as well. And so I know that, and there may even be an attempt. I think I have seen it like through social media and things of that nature, to where it's like, hey, this is only like this is not for you, Black American. This is not for you. I've seen those arguments. I've seen various other types of arguments saying like, no, you need to listen to this one, or you need to listen to that one, or the president, the current president himself even said, like, your like a person's blackness is predicated upon them accepting him as a president, or voting in a democratic way, seeing things from a democratic perspective. Okay. Right now, there are some terms that I want you to see. And when you look at the breakdown of these terms, I'll make some comments on some things here. Notable ethnic term, you're going to see a chart, and you're going to see how many times these words are used, so that you can see where the emphasis is. And that in and of itself, that's going to lead into some other dialogue and discussion as well. Okay. So American Indian, Native American is only, now when we're looking at notable ethnic terms in the conservative promise, the mandate for leadership, American Indian and Native American is mentioned 26 times alone. So that's specifically talking about the American Indian. Okay? That's apart from this one. You see where it says Indian? American Indian. The way the count is done, those are two separate items. Okay? I'm sure people are going to see this. They're just like, oh my gosh, this guy has indexed. Like, this is an index. I created this. The charts here. I created these charts. Full index of these words. And it took some work. Of course, this study is going to take some work. I'm willing to put in the work. Latino is only mentioned in the footnotes. Okay. And here's one thing. When I saw this, I mean, being a Black American, I was like, black children. That term is only mentioned once, and it's included in the mandate for leadership, the conservative promise. When it's talking about being born to unmarried mothers, I was like, whoa, whoa. Goodness gracious. Black children only being used when it's talking about being unborn to, or being born to unmarried mothers. I know some may say, well, did that offend you? I mean, it is true, isn't it? But I'll just have to leave that there. Because that's painful. That is very painful to see that. So yeah, Indian Mexican, Black American, is used, but it's a small amount of time. And when you look at this right here, current and former president. Now, this is the thing that amazes me, that President Donald Trump, even though his name is mentioned up to more than 300 times, as you can see plainly, he has denied that he didn't know about Project 2025. And so he had some words about it. He said that he said some tough words about it. And so it makes a person seem like, hey, he doesn't know about this. He's just concerned about and going to have his administration to focus upon and handle what the plans are for his very own administration. That's all he's going to do. Reagan is very important. Reagan is mentioned more than 50 times, and that's due to the Reaganomics and how the mandate for leadership sees that period as something that was quite successful due to what Reagan got accomplished. And so, energy, you see this. I have over here to the side for additional info the bar chart of sectors here. Debt is mentioned 42 times. Military is mentioned 169 times. Okay. Needed a nice place to put it. All right. I need you to look at that bar, that first one, energy. It may be if, let's say, for example, if President Donald Trump gets in office, due to the emphasis, due to the lobbying and whatever else is going to happen with energy and with drilling and all these other different things. Did you hear him say not that long ago, drill, baby, drill? It may be that energy, as far as a stock is concerned, it may be that energy might end up having a boost and going to the upside. It may be. There may be something there. Who knows? We don't know. A risk will be involved, definitely, but it may be due to how many times it's mentioned. Maybe a possibility that that's going to end up affecting NASDAQ and also the SP 500. Then you have oil. I say SP 500. I meant the S&P 500. Then you have oil, finance, industrial, big tech, gold, and healthcare. And you see how little healthcare is mentioned, but it receives attention. Words relating to Border Patrol. Now, when you look at how many times border is mentioned here, it may also mean that the prisons, that there's going to be something happening there. Border Patrol, drugs, cartel, fentanyl, ICE, deport. So this may indeed affect prison stock, because if it's this much emphasis is placed on border in the in Project 2025, and then you also hear President Donald Trump also talking about how he'll have one of the greatest mass deportations that the nation has ever seen, then that means that prisons are definitely going to be affected. Okay. Or it may, you know what, there may be a possibility. I mean, I'm saying definitely it may be a direct deportation, but at the same time, it may be that prisons will be impacted. Okay. You have international engagement words. You have China, Russia, Europe, Iran, NATO. Look at how much China is mentioned. That says a lot. It's mentioned at around about probably more than 650 times. And of course, due to Africa being rich in its resources, you understand what we're going through with potential conflict that may end up brewing in between America and China. We don't know. We've been hearing different things here and there. We know that there is tension that is there. And so that's why Project 2025 makes mention that it places that type of emphasis that it does. And then you see North Korea and Taiwan. And, Taiwan has some fairly important things there. Taiwan can end up affecting Nvidia and a number of other different big tech stocks. Okay, semiconductor. When you think about Taiwan, you look at North Korea. North Korea is going to be mentioned, but then you also see Russia there. Russia is ranking right next to China, and then you have Africa also being mentioned. So social issues and political terminology. Then you have right, constitution, immigrant, left, the right and the left. Okay. We'll talk about that a little later, because once we get into the study, we have to kind of go back to France, and we got to talk about how the right and the left, how that ended up taking hold in the American vocabulary. You know, okay, you got left hand and right hand, but we're talking about those who are for progress and those who are holding on to traditional political views. Okay, those who normally ended up going on the right side of the king or in Parliament, those who ended up going on the left side. One group identified with being progressive, another group ended up wanting to hold to the traditional values in Europe, that particular part of Europe. That's where you get right and left from. Minority human rights, reparations. Reparations, when you see it mentioned in Project 2025, reparations is actually, reparations is applying to environmental reparations. So this is talking about global warming and things of that nature. So this is not talking about Black American reparations. That's not that. This reparations, and this is all the times that is mentioned in the entire document. This is not talking about Black American reparations. This is talking about environmental reparations. And you see human trafficking is in there as well. Okay. The religious terms, as you see right over here on where it says additional info, the name Jesus is not mentioned. Religious and religious freedom are to be treated as two separate terms. That's why you see religious there, because it receives quite a bit of emphasis. And then religious freedom, you have that a lot in there. Bible and Quran, they are not in Project 2025. But you churches, Islam, God, and Christian, those are in there quite often as well. So, yeah. These are important. These ones right here, they are important because it's gonna play into the family values. It's gonna also speak to the conservative Christian context. Okay, it's gonna appeal to that particular group of conservatives. Social welfare. So we have WIC, EBT, Social Security, food stamps, SNAP, Medicaid. Okay. I thought Medicare. Thought that had a hit. I don't know why it's not on this list, but Medicaid has its places mentioned a little more than 50 times, and what we'll find out is once we get into the chapter, you'll see that Medicaid, according to the way that it is talked about, Medicaid and Medicare, I do remember seeing Medicare in there. I don't know why. It probably didn't rank that high, but Medicaid, of course, it is running up a deficit. So it receives that emphasis because it's like, hey, this thing runs us trillions of dollars, like consistently. Whenever we go and take inventory of all these different things, this particular portion of welfare, it It's in the trillions. And so you know what the attention is drawn there, right? Hey, this may be something that's causing the country to have a deficit. And so we might need to kind of pull back. And that's where you get the idea of conserving from. Because you're looking at different things. You want to make sure that people are working. But then you're looking at different things to see, okay, what can be restricted? What can be conserved? What can be held back? Okay. So retirement, veteran housing, individual, i.e. focus upon individual rights. So if you're concerned about food stamps, WIC, EBT, probably be reasonable to read along with some of those things or follow through with the study. Now, political philosophies and movements in popular terms. I want you to look at these terms. Just take a moment. Look at these terms real quick. Do you see why they're grouped? Okay. You see a lot of these terms. Some of these terms are being used in conjunction with each other. That would be like an item, like a series of items or item in a series. You would end up having these in that separated by commas, and you see it show up over and over and over. Wokeism, LBGT, and Marxism. And then there is also, you see this one called the Great Awakening. That's what that's how the conservatives are seeing anything that's dealing with a liberal agenda. It is now called, like the Great Awakening, the Christian movement from early America. The Great Awakening, now you have the Great Awakening. So it's like satire with things that are dealing with woke and wokeism or wokeness. And so wokeness, of course, being woke, that was an African American term. It even came from the soul era, being woke. Wake up, everybody. You even hear Teddy Pendergrass talking about wake up, everybody. No more sleeping in bed. You remember that song? That's coming from those Philly musicians from Philadelphia. So woke, black people have been like the Black Panthers. That was a word that they used. You got to stay woke because you know what's happening. You know how people are treating us, specifically Black Americans. And then you start hearing it in the hip hop music. Then you will hear someone like Erykah Badu say it as early as the early 90s. Erykah Badu. Then you hear Lauryn Hill say it. So this is something that has been in the black community for decades upon decades. Now you need to stay woke. All right, stay woke, my brother. And then it later turned into, all right, man, stay woke. And then, oh, I'm woke, hip hop era. And now it has been passed on to something else. It has evolved into, now it's no longer just representing a Black American group, or it's not a Black American idiom anymore. It is now shared with the masses. So it's kind of like with, hip hop music itself. It's now shared with the masses. Dancing, various types of dances that African Americans have made or created, various types of art. It's almost like a bluegrass with the banjo. Bluegrass started with slaves, with the Black Americans who were enslaved. And then next thing you know, during emancipation, it became super popular. And then here come the record companies in the 1900s, and then they take bluegrass and then just it becomes something else. It's no longer that which is specific to the Black American context. It belongs to someone else now. Bluegrass, that belongs to someone else. Communism. But the word commie is not used. They may have wanted to use it, but just out of being professional, it was not used. So communism, so wokeism, Marxism, LGBT, and all these other different things, Black Lives Matter, that is grouped with communism in various ways throughout the document. And even DEI. DEI, that's also seen as like of course, liberal is woke, critical race theory, equality, socialism, all that stuff is kind of lumped together. You guys are going to learn something. If you feel that you have learned something, say, I have learned something. I have learned something, Mr. Montgomery Deep History. Reproductive health terms. So, reproductive health terms, abortion, S*X or S*XUAL. Those terms being paired together over 50 times, and that's due to, like, we're gonna have good dialogue and discussion about that. We're gonna have great dialogue and discussion about that. Gender. S*X orientation, transgenderism, reproductive health, gender equality. Did you know that the document puts that together? And whenever that's taught in a school, Project 2025 has it to where it's described as that word, that one, the P word right there. I'm trying to go around. I don't want this to be taken down or where I have to do this all over again. Then reproductive rights. Okay. Contraception. Let's go to the next one. Y'all can see this. Y'all can slide the YouTube slider back. So let me move on. If you want to go back and look at that, because you probably will want to. But contraception. There's a view about contraception that is here that some conservatives might say, oh, hey, huh? What are you talking about? Okay. Roe v. Wade, S*X offenders. I don't know if I could say that word. I don't know if that's violating something, but it's actually it's in there. It's in the document. And then that last one right there. Now, terms associated with conservative family values. What popular terms receive attention in the documents? Authority, family, children, parents, life, marriage, and that's children, child, any variation of that. Parents, parental. And when you see that star, that means any variation of that, even with the previous slides, with the previous terms. That's any variation of that word. Life, marriage, pro-life, women, men, pro-family. See that? And you see authority. See how many times it's mentioned? And it can apply across the board, But it's just a conservative. That's one of those words. That's why the emphasis is placed on it. That was like a word that caught my attention as I read through the document. Okay. Pro-family, pro-life. Social class term: elite, poor, alien, middle America, slave. Yes, slave is mentioned in the document. But slave or slavery is mentioned in the document because it's saying that, hey, we were able, look at what happens. Like, you don't have to do anything special. Look at how we as an American people didn't have to have something special to happen in order to rid the country of slavery. Like, we were able to deal with that as an American people. That's why that's in there. Middle America, alien, poor, elite. And you're gonna see you see elite used a lot because it's, it's dealing with how the elite liberals, basically it's talking about how the elite liberals are funding and fueling some of the wokeism, I guess you could say, based on the way Project 2025 puts it. Terms associated with education: student loan, public school, scholarships, private school, block grant, HBCU. HBCU jumped out at me, as you see right here, predominantly white institution, does not receive mention in the document. Now, HBCU is actually used, it caught my eye because of a block grant. So if when you're looking at block grants, there are different types of grants that are out there, but when you look at a block grant, it caught my eye because, a block grant, basically, a block grant is what it is, and a block grant does not fluctuate or compensate for any growing need during the time that that group of time that block grant is supposed to cover. It doesn't deal with compensating for any type of fluctuation in need. And so that's why I was like, okay, let's see what you're saying about historically black college or university and block grants. So that's what caught my eye. Private school, public schools, student loans. My goodness, there's some stuff about public school and private school that's gonna receive some emphasis, and it may ask for us to just take a break and just be like, okay, let's go some days on this right here. Let's go some days on this because of what is being said about academics, about scholarship for children. Okay, what is going on in the scholastic domain of children? How are they being taught? How are they being educated? Is it reminiscent of what came out of the 1960s and 1970s S*X revolution, and when that type of education got put into the school system? Is it dealing with that? Like, what is it dealing with? Why is it used so much? Okay. Why is it such emphasis? And boom, that is it. That's Project 2025, the intro. And I see on my timer, I got 2.5 hours. There are so many other things that could have been said, but I think that this is something that is setting us up for success because you'll have this as like a reference tool. There's so much that could have been said, but hey, we just have to. Some of it will get hashed out in some of these chapters, so that's why I'm not worried about that. Like, this is enough. This is what you need in order to help you to better understand what these chapters are talking about. You have your index here. If you want to go back and as you read along with us, you want to go back and see like, I wonder, like Montgomery Deep History already has like a little index of words. So let me go back and scroll, take this YouTube slider and just kind of scroll back and see how many times this word was used and compare the dynamic of this word and this word. You will be able to do that now. I am putting that in your hands. Okay, so this that's why this was so extensive. Now, some of these other chapters we just want to take words, some important paragraphs, and we just want to dissect them, and then we'll move on. You know, some of them I don't know if they'll carry us this long, like this long. This needed to be this long. But at the same time, some may say, "Man, I don't know if it needed to be this long." But but hey, enough work was put into it so that you could have what you need in order to have a better understanding of this particular proposal. Because this stuff is, you know, we have to treat it delicately. We have to treat it seriously, and we have to be we have to hear. We have to give an ear. Conservatives need to give an ear to liberals and see what they're saying. Liberals need to give an ear to conservatives and see what they're saying. Like, let me find out what you're communicating. Let me weigh it out intellectually. We are intelligent beings. So let's weigh this stuff out. Let's talk to each other. Let's weigh it out. Let's try. I mean, we're a collective. We're the American people. And this is what we're in. We're in this republic together. And we need to make this thing work. Like, we need to be able to listen to each other. There are some things that we can come to consensus on. There are some things that you might see in here. You may be a liberal. You'll say, I don't agree with that. Then there may be some things as a liberal you may see it and say, yeah, I agree with that. I see why they're saying that. Then as a conservative, there may be some things that you may say, oh, wait, no, I don't agree with that. That's not floating my boat. But then there may be some things that you may see and say, I approve of that. I give my full support for that particular thing. Okay. At any rate, either way it goes, I think that this will be something that will be very helpful for us all. So once again, this is Montgomery Deep History. It is time for us to wrap this thing up. Enjoy the study. Hope to see many of you on the lives. Hope to see many of you engaging. Tell your friends, spread the word. Fill up those comments. Maybe you'll give us some ideas to do some other things. But let's study. Let's get educated. Let's be readers. Let's understand syntax and semantics, not just semantics. Let's not just call people names. Let's try to be understanding. Let's see what the liberals are saying. Let's listen. Let's see what the conservatives are saying. Let's listen to them. Okay? We're intelligent beings. And I have a high view of all of you. So, you guys rest well. And let's be prepared to jump in. Project 2025 of Montgomery Deep History Study. Thank you for hanging with me.